So, a question about the mud floods. How did they do the flooding? Have you got any ideas?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. Um, I actually think they spiked the grid.
Hmm.
I
Interesting.
think that though it was done in a number of ways, but I think they spiked the grid
Wow.
because we know we're sat on an energy grid, what we refer to as ley lines. I think that that was disrupted.
Yeah.
I think direct energy weapons,
Yeah.
I think
Uh,
they were used as well.
that's really interesting. We're going to get into some great conversations, you and I, Guy. I'm not toying with the energy grid because I would never do that, but I am engaging directly with some uh, nodes on the grid, and I have done for a while now. And it's very interesting work because I've been called to do it. Clearly, it's not something that you go, oh, I think I'll do this.
Mm,
Yeah, I've ended up doing really interesting work on the grid, and it's got more and more powerful when I discovered that the Egyptian gods were called the Netters, and it tied into Indra's net, and that's kind of the thing. The Egyptian gods weren't gods in effect; they were
no.
attributes. They were
Mm,
attributes of which you embodied, of which you could access the net, as they called it. So let me just ask you about the obelisks and about the remembrance memorials and what your take is on that, because they're everywhere, aren't they?
hmm.
Every village
Yeah,
green, everywhere. So, do you have a take on that? And would you speak
I
of that?
do. Yeah, I do. Yeah. And I wrote about it in that book.
Yeah.
Now, I can't say his surname, I'm not allowed to, but
Hmm.
there is an Irish professor who spent his lifetime researching and lecturing about obelisks, needles, whatever you want to call them.
Hmm.
Um, he came out with his research late 2019. At the same time, he actually posted to say there was going to be something happening in the spring of the following year involving a respiratory disease and a sudden cure. His house was burnt down. He lost his job and he's now lecturing in Romania. So I've been told that by him that I'm not allowed to mention his name, but he's Kevin from Ireland.
Perfect.
Um,
Yeah.
Now, he says that the needles and obelisks are a sign. They're a sign that
Yeah.
the population has been wiped out, that the people in within that area, a certain distance, the larger the needle or obelisk, the larger the population. But it's to show you that the people living within a certain area have been replaced.
Hmm. That's uh that's a reframe, isn't it?
Mm, yeah.
It really is. Would you say that uh that you can program those? Would you say that they are programmable in terms of them being earth acupuncture? Let's put it that way.
Yes, yes, I think so because they're all on ley lines,
Yeah,
and everything that the Tartarians built is on ley lines. They're all on energy grids. I think it's all connected. So
yeah,
yes, I do believe so. Yeah,
yeah,
I think everything was designed to do that.
yeah,
So I think that they're spiked. I think that those are
yeah,
spiking an energy grid.
yeah. It's interesting. I was in Mallorca recently, and I got called there, and I went there twice actually in the space of 6 weeks because I got called to come back. And the energy there is so much more open than here. It's extraordinarily open, and the subtle energies, the powerful nodes, grid points there are just off the chart, and they're actually available for everyone. And what I find in Albion uh, is that everything is closed.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a lot of work to be done. I'm not, that's not true, and I'm not going to say that, but because we can quite easily open them back up. But, they are very occupied,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of work to be done by everyone to instill, a loving consciousness. Let's put it
Mm.
that way.
Yeah.
I I see these memorials, I see these needles in all these different places, and I just think that they're all sacrificial rituals,
Hmm. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
and they remind us of death.
Mm. Yes, they do. Yeah, that's what they're for. Some people would say they're phallic, but
Mm,
which is probably true to an extent. I think that they're designed with several um, aspects or thought processes, but ultimately they're spiking the energy grid, and
mm,
they're from what the research I've read is that they are designed to show everybody that there's been a reset. This area's done. We've wiped them out and we've
mm.
repopulated.
Yeah, interesting. What would your take be then? Because I did have a very heated conversation with somebody I very much respect recently, who said that they need to come down. Now, I agree with that,
Hmm.
but I also said we're in a period of transition.
Mm.
Um, and in the meantime, we can go and reprogram those with our own consciousness. And if we take, especially women with us, or if the women lead us, or if there is a union, a divine masculine feminine union in ceremony around these, we can actually reprogram them. And he was very much like, no, you can't. We have to. They will not. They will always be occupied territory until they're taken down. And I disagreed with him. And we very politely, I didn't react. I just responded.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, I was like, well, let you know we can reprogram these, and yes, it would be great if you know Mother Nature took them over and took them back and crumbled them down so that those portals are closed and they're taken back for the good of the planet, really. My question to you is: do you believe that you can reprogram them, and do you think that ultimately they will be removed or they will be reprogrammed with the new paradigm consciousness? What do you
I
think
don't
about that?
know. I don't know because it depends how you look at it. I mean, some people might say that because of what they represent, they need to go.
Yeah.
Other people might say, well, no. Obviously, they can't. As far as I understand, there would be no reason why they can't be reprogrammed.
Mm,
It would be no different to going into a church and changing the bell back to 432 hertz instead of 440. It's
mm,
everything resonates. So I can't see why that wouldn't be possible. But it might be the same as taking down a statue of Winston Churchill. We might be able
mm,
to spray a different color and knock the head off and put the head of someone who was decent, a decent human being, on it instead. But still, what it represents is a negative
mm,
um, aspect of what's been done. So
yeah.
I guess it just depends on your point of view or the point of view of the people in that area. I suppose it would be difficult to ask the local community wherever there is an obelisk what they think because they might not understand what it means because there's one near me in a place called Wellington just off the M5.
Yeah.
There's a huge monument there and it's to commemorate Battle of Waterloo.
Yeah.
But it's not. We
Mm,
know it isn't. It needs, it needs a re-education program locally to tell people exactly what that's for and what it represents. And then they might decide themselves that they actually, if they understand and take it on board, they might then decide that they no longer want to see it. They never want to see it ever again. I suppose it just depends on people's opinions. But
yeah.
I would guess my answer to your question is I agree with both of you.
Yeah. I agree with both of us too. Funnily enough, I think both. I think both. I did some work in Carlisle Castle, which is an absolute death machine. And I walked in and it's still a death machine. It's full of army vehicles and it's still being used now. And I went into uh, another state of consciousness, and I saw the whole building being overgrown with Mother Nature, with trees, with plants, with flowers, with grass. That's what I actually saw, and that was my intention actually, that the human aspect of that, because all people. the kind of friendly take on castles is that they were citadels to keep the local people safe, and the agricultural workers worked outside, and then they were brought inside. But they're kind of the exact opposite. They were kind of death machines where, pillaging soldiers would live, and they went out to destroy the local people, and then they came back in. I'm sure there was a bit of both, but certainly with the Welsh castles, they were absolute technological devices for mass slaughter. Um, and they were built to slaughter the local people. And that's why the Welsh castles are so phenomenal, because the Welsh people were so phenomenal and they could not be conquered. And they needed, they needed those castles to, the English needed those castles to be built to actually finally destroy them, and they never did. Actually, they never got rid of that incredibly ancient pre-Antediluvian consciousness that the Welsh still have. But yeah, the architectural nature of this kind of challenge that we're going through is really big. And I think once people start thinking about their environment more, the buildings more, there's lots of little things that we touch on. The plastic trainers, the walking on the grass, the concrete, the tarmac, all these things,
Yeah.
the charging of the body. I mean, I go out almost every day. I do a little bit of sun gazing. I'm sure my neighbors think I'm nuts, but I just stand on the grass outside my house for a couple of minutes. All these things all tie in, don't they? And I think that,
Yes.
and I think Tartaria is such a huge, enormous, magnificent, wonderful subject with which you can get into all of these different subjects. One of the things that absolutely fascinated me was the electric, bringing down from the ether, which still absolutely blows me away. It's so unreal from what my perception was before. How can we do this? But actually, that gets into electroculture. So
Yes, it does.
it just leads into that. It's. Can you speak more of the technology of these buildings, these Tartarian buildings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so really what we're looking at is the same basis that a pyramid operated on, obviously when they had the capstones in place. They're harnessing energy from the electromagnetic grid. But also you've got telluric energy as well. So it also it would work in water. So through salt water, ships were using the same technology principle to actually illuminate lighting and run electricity on board ships.
Mm.
So it's using what we feel, the energy all around us, the static energy, the pull between the poles is being harnessed. Um, so a lot of buildings had what appeared to be a weather vane or a lightning conductor. And I think the
Mm.
best description I've ever given anybody is watch Back to the Future, the first film, when
Mm.
the lightning bolt hits the old town hall clock tower and the energy is then sent into a car to enable it to run the flux capacitor to have enough energy to time travel. It's the same principle. They're showing you in that film quite a lot actually, because that building's Tartarian. So that they're showing you. So it's been disclosed softly for a very long time. So it's harnessing energy. And what they would do is typically in copper domed buildings. St. Paul's would perhaps be a good example of that, that most people can picture in their minds. Um, they were once shiny copper, and they would harness energy within them, and it was stored in tanks of red mercury with copper rods inside.
Yeah.
And so they basically had in the rooftops a receiver, if you like, an antenna that received electricity and a capacitor and a resonator. And that would harness the energy. And then the energy was sent from those buildings across the town or city to buildings actually through cables. The larger buildings had their own kit, Antiquitech. They had that, but the smaller buildings didn't. So, if you look at early photographs, before the telegraph was invented, you'll see images of towns and cities with cables running all over the place. And in some early photographs, they've managed to Photoshop them out using a process called vanilla sky. It's early photo manipulation, but they Photoshop them out of the sky, but they can't Photoshop them out of where they run across the front of a building. So you can normally pick the lines up again, and I've got loads of images of these.
Mm,
So people have argued with me, well, that's the telegraph. They're telegraph poles and cables, and I'd say, well, do you think every town had a place where you could a post office, if you like, a centre you could go into, a building you could go into to send a telegraph office or whatever? Well, yeah. Well, I agree. Is it possible that every single house had one too? Well, no, of course not. Then why would there be over 1,000 cables running through New York City? Why would that be? And
mm,
why would that be the case in Hiroshima, for example, or
yeah,
Sydney, or Rio de Janeiro? They're everywhere. And incidentally, why would they be in place before the telegraph was invented? Which is
mm,
another strange question that people don't seem to be able to give me an answer to. So they were running energy, but they also did it through the roads.
mm,
Now, underneath the roads, they had metal grids, and those metal grids were what were powering electric vehicles,
mm,
electric scooters, electric vehicles, electric trams as
mm.
well. They were being powered through the roads.
Interestingly enough, Guy, you'll like this. In fact, you've probably seen it, but I've got a DVD that I got because I clear houses for a living, so I get all this stuff, all
You
the
must
kind
see some mad things.
of. Yeah, I do actually. I really do. The whole spectrum. I know a lot about stuff, like things, but there's a BFI, British Film Institute DVD that I've got kicking about in my van that's actually probably worth a bit of money, and it's called Edwardian Electric Edwardians. It's called, and it's a double DVD. And BFI DVDs are quite rare because they did limited runs, and they only sold them in the BFI in London. They didn't sell them elsewhere. And you're more than welcome to borrow it. But it's
I'd love to.
well, DVD. You can't sell DVDs anymore, by the way. That doesn't happen. It's really weird how it's just suddenly dropped off the scale. And but I was giving all these DVDs away to someone, and I just grabbed that one. And I was like, no, I can't let that one go because that's got stuff in it that I really want to see. Um, but there was quite clearly a huge culture in the Edwardian times of the electrification of our environment that's
Mm.
completely been. I suppose the old milk tram kind of in a way was like a legacy kind of, transport from that era. But it's amazing how I mean, for me personally, it's obviously multi-dimensional, but the First World War and the Second World War, uh, in themselves, they were massive resets. It's almost like the First World War, the Second World War. And now, this third reset, as I would call it, the Great Reset, as the Schwabster calls it. Um, I come from Portsmouth. Half my family come from Portsmouth, half of them from Liverpool. And if you know anything about Liverpool and Portsmouth, they were the most beautiful Victorian red brick cities ever. And Portsmouth was an extraordinarily beautiful red brick place, as was Liverpool. And you mentioned it earlier, that technology. And they were both bombed to within an inch of their life. So much
On
so,
purpose.
on
Mm.
purpose, absolutely,
Mm.
just absolutely devastated. I grew up, in Portsmouth and in Liverpool. Up until the early 90s, there was big bomb sites still. And in
Mm.
the 70s, there was massive bomb sites in Portsmouth still. I used to play on them. And I'm an Evertonian, my family are Evertonians, and I used to go and watch the football. And we used to drive our cars onto massive bomb sites around Stanley Park. And we used to leave our car there, and the local kids would come along and go, "Look after your car, mister." And you give them 20p so they don't scratch your car.
Mm.
But these huge great bomb sites everywhere. Portsmouth has only got one Georgian street left. And that's actually the birthplace of Charles Dickinson, which is bizarre. It's like the one Georgian street that's left, and it's not even a street anymore. You kind of enter it into a T shape, and it's got dead ends either end, and it's like a twee little kind of Georgian
Mm,
example, you know. But the red brick buildings in Portsmouth have pretty much, all the civil buildings have all gone, all of them.
yeah.
Obviously, I think the Guildhall's still there, obviously, but it seemed to me, and I've always thought this, why weren't some of these buildings bombed? Why wasn't St. Paul's bombed? Why wasn't the Guildhall bombed? Why wasn't,
Do you want to know why?
yeah, I do. I really do, because it's like, well, it's like
I'll
precision
tell you.
bombing. Yeah, yeah, go for it. Yeah,
Yeah, well, it was. I mean, London is perhaps it's the only area I've researched, and London, the Blitz really impacted the East End. The East End of London, going in towards the Docklands, Canary Wharf. Um, that's where it took the majority of the bombing. I mean, there was the odd stray that sort of hit a little bit. Buckingham Palace and St Paul's did get um,
yeah,
a bit of shrapnel, if you like. But
yeah,
the East End was completely annihilated. And at the time, there was I can't remember the first names, but the surnames are Abercrombie
yeah,
and Goldfinger. Abercrombie and Goldfinger were property developers, bloodline connected to bloodline families that had
yeah,
been trying to redevelop the East End of London for a very long time, and people refused. They wouldn't sell or they wouldn't budge, depending on their situation. World War II came along, and the exact area of land that they wanted to redevelop was flattened. Now, nobody saw what actually took place because everybody was sent into an Anderson shelter or underground into the tube stations, and the children were evacuated. So there weren't people around to witness what happened.
yeah, yeah,
But the one thing I do not know is who actually did the bombing. Because if I was if I was at war against England, Britain, and I was flying over to either dent morale or cause damage to the infrastructure, then I would have hit Westminster, Buckingham Palace, Downing Street,
yeah,
Whitehall,
yeah,
and St Paul's for morale. That would have been a good one. Why would I have decided to just specifically bomb the only part of London that two very wealthy bloodline family members wanted to purchase and redevelop? I
yeah,
find that quite extraordinary. So my question is, who was actually flying those planes?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the same as happening in California and Hawaii.
Hmm.
Though it's the same, isn't it? It's exactly the same playbook. They're so
Dwayne
boring,
and
Guy.
Oprah. Dwayne and Oprah
Yeah, but
taking
that
care of yeah, a bit of
business.
property development, land
Yeah,
development. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I would say that the fellow who looked a little bit like Charlie Chaplin, that whose name we're not still allowed to say on
yeah,
certainly on YouTube and Facebook. I don't know if he had any knowledge of what was actually being hit
yeah,
in Britain. I
yeah,
find it very strange that the places that looked outside of, I mean, look at Coventry Cathedral. The places
mm,
outside of London that took the impact all had architecture they didn't want.
yeah.
And what was
I
left over has been left to fall apart and deteriorate. A lot of these places are now derelict and, you know,
yeah,
boarded up and falling apart.
yeah. So give me in terms of the timelines of the Tartarian civilization or consciousness, let's put it that way. It for me, it's unknown.
Mm.
It almost like comes out of a place that we're not quite sure of. Can you speak of the timelines of
Yeah,
when
sure.
these things happened? Yeah,
Yeah, so the first thing is that people need to look at the timeline. The timeline's been falsified, and this is information that's been that's been gathered from a researcher that I've spent a lot of time looking into, a Russian scientist called Anatoly Fomenko, and he's not alone. Einstein was researching this as well. That our timeline's been falsified. Neither of them believed the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages happened at all. They were plonked in there. So we've got this very slow progression of technology, how we evolve with building techniques and everything else. leading up to the Industrial Revolution. Now, they believe, as do I, that in 1776, when New World Order began, that 800 years were added to the timeline. So in 1776, the year was actually 976. And if you go into an old church or cathedral or actually look for a date on an old building, you'll often see that the first number isn't a number at all, it's the letter J. And J stands for the millennial reign of Christ. So if Jesus lived or reigned for 1,000 years, and 800 years have been added to our timeline. And as far as we know, as I said, I'm not religious, but it's very difficult to dismiss this the further you dig.
Yeah.
If he was born, as we are told, in 3 BC, which I know sounds strange, but that's allegedly when he was born, and he died in 976 AD, then we're not a million miles away. We're 21 years away from it being a millennial reign.
Mm,
So the period of time I think was close to 1,000 years, and at a
mm,
time of buildings being like these cathedrals that we've seen
mm,
being constructed by angels, or certainly beings of a higher frequency, or living in a higher vibration or dimension almost.
mm,
I think they were completely different people to us.
mm,
I don't even know if they actually really looked like us. And I think everything from that's been created. Like Nikola Tesla. Yeah, if you look at Nikola Tesla, if you look at Napoleon Bonaparte, these people never have living descendants.
mm,
Einstein doesn't either, and I think that that's fantastic, because what you can do is you can invent a person, or you can take a person that was significant but build them up and give them credit for things they didn't actually achieve, and pile more and more on. I mean, Napoleon's based upon Apollo or Apollyon. Um, uh, so you've then got a backstory, and if they've got no living descendants, you can't go and question their offspring. So
mm,
Napoleon allegedly had 2 children. They both died. Nikola Tesla didn't have any children at all. Einstein didn't have any children at all. And this goes on and on and on, no matter who you look at.
mm,
um, there's never a living descendant. There's the same with the Charlie Chaplin lookalike from the Chancellor of Germany. There are
mm,
never any descendants, and it's brilliant because you then can't go and say, "Well, show us Granddad's stuff." Can I have a
mm,
look through Granddad's diaries? They don't exist. Case closed. And I contacted Nikola Tesla's museum in Serbia, and I said, I'm trying to find video footage of him, and there isn't any, but there is of Edison and Einstein. But why would that be? They said, we think he might have been camera shy. I said, so somebody who gave presentations, was paid to talk at dinner parties and functions all over the world, but more so in America, was camera shy. He was interviewed allegedly by every newspaper and also sort of electrical kind of journals and so on. I find that hard to believe. Why isn't there any video footage of him? And why aren't there any living descendants? And then someone got in contact with me and said that they are the great granddaughter of his sister. And I said, wow, that's fantastic. You must have some photographs, or anything you can share with me would be really handy. Oh yeah, I'll see what I can find. And that I contacted them again, and then I started to dig. And then they said, Donald Trump's told me I can't talk to you. And I realized, of course, I was talking to a lunatic.
yeah.
There isn't a living descendant out there of Napoleon. There isn't one of Nikola Tesla. I think these are fictitious people that have been created to explain things, or
It,
to blame or credit.
mm. Interestingly enough, Napoleon died on an island in the middle of nowhere, a
Mm.
destitute and poor man. And I think Tesla died a destitute man in a horrible environment as well. I mean, let's say this. I said it a moment ago, but the playbook is boring.
Mm.
It is actually the story is fantastic, and the way they roll things out, but ultimately it's the same, the same, the same, the same. It's just the same, and I think people are noticing
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the playbook is the same now.
Yeah.
I mean, the Tesla thing is extraordinary, like you say. I mean, the first time I ever heard about Tesla was the orchestral maneuvers in the Dark song, Tesla Girls.
Mm,
That's how I came across it, which is what,
yeah.
81. And that's an interesting in.
Mm,
And they were an electronic synth band, and it
mm.
was it was the era of, New Order, Japan, and Soft Cell and Depeche
Oh, now
Mode.
we're talking.
But Tesla Girls, Tesla Girls, who's Tesla? Who is Tesla?
Yeah.
Um,
There's a good film called Prestige where David
I've
Bowie
seen that.
plays, yeah, plays
Yeah.
Tesla.
That's
But
a
yeah,
great film.
it
That's
is.
a Christopher
Yeah.
Nolan film.
Mm.
He knows stuff, that guy.
Yes,
He's
I think that that's the
yeah,
idea with Hollywood, and I think that the reason
uh,
it is called Hollywood is because, magic wands are made from the tree
yeah,
of, the wood from a holly tree, and magic
yeah,
comes alive in Hollywood, and I think that that is the sole purpose of Hollywood to softly disclose, and I think that the Jesuits, the parasites, whoever you want to call these people, I think the reason that they do show us what they're doing is because they're trying to avoid karmic retribution. They think that by telling us, even though it's the sort of poisoned apple scenario, if I laugh and give you an apple and said, "Oh, I've just put poison in that," and you eat it and die, well, that's on you. But if I don't tell you I've done that, then that's on me. So if I bring out a film telling you every single secret in the world that's ever happened, and everybody at the end says, "Wow, I love science fiction," well, that's your problem. I
yeah,
told you.
yeah,
And I think that that's what it's about. And
yeah,
Mr. Savile, um, you know, Starmer's friend Savile,
yeah.
when he was found dead, little note, both fingers crossed, saying, "I hope I did enough." He thought by all the charity work he had done, he had compensated for all the harm he had done. And I think that that's how these parasites operate. They
They
think that
do.
as long as they tell us the truth, or and even if it's done in a way in which we'll just dismiss it, it's a joke, it's off cuff, or in works of science fiction, perhaps it's the works of H.G. Wells or Jules Verne,
Yeah,
someone like that, or that we've then been told this
yeah,
soft disclosure is enough, and my hope is that it isn't. That if they do
uh,
meet their maker, whatever that is, they'll say, "Yeah, yeah, well, you tricked them. You might have shown them what it is, but you did it in a way in which they would never believe it." Richard Shaver is another one. So, I think that I think that they use these tools to play with our minds. And with regard to cloning, you mentioned the dolls earlier. I mean, that's a
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah,
That
huge.
that's
It's
yeah. Did you know if they broke and you sent it back to the manufacturer and they couldn't fix it, they
yeah,
returned it to the child with a death certificate?
yeah. I did know that. I did know that there was a death certificate involved in that
That's
story.
disgusting.
It's interesting, guy. I'll just say this quickly. I got three. Well, I got two examples of the method of revelation, as they call it, or
Mm,
whatever they call it, where they have to tell us what they're doing. I remember in the early 90s. I can't call him the king, but Prince Charles.
no, he's
Um,
neither, is he? Charles
no,
Windsor.
yeah, Charles
Mm,
Windsor. He came out and he said, if we're not careful, we're going to drown in a sea of grey goo. And he was talking about nanotech.
mm.
Yeah, I remember him saying that. And the other one, which is really interesting, is Gordon Brown said when he was Prime Minister, we're going to put cameras in every single lay-by in every single country lane all over the country. And Raina recently, whatever her name is, she said, we are going to send the immigrant population into every corner of this land. So they're still using it. But I think because there is a great awakening. There absolutely 100% is an awakening amongst normal people. My coach builder has stopped paying his tax. The guy who fitted my carpets like 4 or 5 months ago. We had an extraordinary conversation, and I always ask these people, "Are you in any groups? Do you talk to anyone?" No, just connected, just seeing
mm,
it. So there is this great awakening. But again, it's a boring playbook. They come out and say something. It's unfortunate the kind of the NPC characters, I don't like to call them that, but the people who are slowly waking up, they don't actually, they still just think that the people in Westminster are incompetent and they're a bit stupid and not really fucking evil.
mm,
Just really
mm,
fucking degenerate. It's
mm.
it's extraordinary, isn't it? How, oh dear, these people who are running the country, they're a bit stupid. Well, no, they're not because they're designed. Everything they're doing is designed to do that, and that's really really difficult to get your head around if you're a nice person because you want to believe the best in other people.
Yeah.
But it is quite clearly all by design. Um,
And it's not
I
them in
actually think
charge
they're
anyway.
failing with their Great Reset guy.
I think so too. I think
I
that
think they are.
we're seeing them panic, and I think they're going to chuck more at us
Yeah,
in desperation. And,
yeah,
and and what people, I have this conversation with people every day.
yeah,
It doesn't matter who you vote for. You're going to get so sick of Labour. Even if you voted for them, you're going to get so sick of Labour, you will vote Conservative next time to spite Labour. What you've got to do is not vote at all. Everybody needs to stop voting so they can't form a government. We don't need one.
yeah,
In Latin, government is actually in Latin mind control.
yeah,
Parliament's talking about controlling the mind, and government is to control the mind. These are parasites. Don't vote for them. Don't watch the news. Don't buy the newspapers. Don't go to any shop that they are involved with. So, for example, in America, I would say boycott Walmart. In the UK, I would say boycott Asda because Asda and Walmart are the same. They're members of the World Economic Forum. Look at all the companies that are part of the World Economic Forum and stop giving them your money.
yeah,
And also understand your own power. If someone's got a car with blue flashing lights on it and fluorescent stickers all over it and comes out wearing a fancy dress costume, um, and decides that they're above you and they have authority over you, you have to understand that they don't. They're a private corporation, just like the council,
yeah,
billing you for something that you aren't actually getting any benefit from. They have no legal right to charge you, and that's why it's the whole full caps thing, and it's not an invoice, it's a demand or a summons. We need to say we're not going to comply anymore. We don't want to fight. We don't want to go. Protesting doesn't work. Marching to Downing Street doesn't work. Keir Starmer hasn't got the power to decide what toilet paper to use without going to, the World Economic Forum or, you know, Pepe Orsini or the Club of Rome or Trilateral Commission. These think tanks run everything. They report to, the Vatican, the Jesuits, Pepe Orsini. It's the bloodline families. And
yeah,
like Rothschild said years ago, he didn't care who sat on the throne as long as he had control of the money.
yeah,
They've told us so many times, stop complying,
yeah,
ignore them.
yeah.
We had the TV license people here a couple of weeks ago and said, you haven't got a TV license. No. And I said, I'm not going to be rude to you. I know you're only doing your job. And actually, I have no problem with you coming in my house. You can turn my TV on and you'll see that all I get is YouTube. So you can click the BBC button and it'll immediately ask you to log in. So you'll be able to see that it isn't used. But I'm not going to invite you in. But I do understand you're only doing your job, so I'm not going to be
Yeah,
nasty with
rude.
you.
Yeah,
And I imagine you get a hard time as it is. And he said, well, actually, you're under no legal obligation to tell me whether you've got one or not. And if they write to you and tell you that you've got to go online and register to say you don't need a TV license or ring them up, that you're actually under no legal obligation to do that.
yeah,
I said, well, I'm under no legal obligation to do anything at all because nobody has authority over me. So thank you, but no, thank you. And he went. And I think that's what we've got to do. It's a little bit like I saw a lad a little while ago being called by the police. He was walking along the street. I think they might have thought he'd done something. They called him over. Now, that was the mistake.